I'm going to start at the absolute beginning because I want to tell this story as to what it means to me and why. And my why is relatively simple to understand once the story's told.
One person he's motivated so far is his mother. She says she's extremely proud of her son's achievements.
And I'm not saying this because I'm Darran's mother, but I know with what Darran's been through in his life, alcoholism and domestic violence, I'm sure Darran's got the know-how to influence and help those that want to be helped, because he understands what they've gone through and what they're going through.
The long-term goal is to write a book. However, I want to talk about the 10th year anniversary of Trojan Academy, why Trojan Academy exists. I was born in 1981 in Mildura, Victoria, with my sister. We grew up for a few short years in Mildura until my mum and real father separated and my mum married a very bad guy into a domestic violence situation. To give context on how the domestic violence started, my mum and I got married in our house. At one point, I ran into the kitchen and saw my stepfather and my mum fighting over what I thought was him trying to stab her or cut her with a knife. Saw blood everywhere. They were struggling with the knife and I ran out. What I later found out was that my father had a fight with his brother. The loser of that fight had to cut their little finger off and put it in a jar on top of our fridge. Therefore, my stepfather was attempting to cut his little finger off. My mum was trying to stop him. So that was the beginning of the extreme domestic violence that we were going to go through for quite a number of years because my stepfather moved us to Darwin. It pursued on and on and on and on. He was in and out of jail, at one point in there for attempted murder. At one point we lived in a hostel for displaced Indigenous people. At the age of about 10, we fled to Tasmania and we lived in a place called Gyra House, which is a shelter for women and children experiencing domestic violence. And we stayed there. They got us a house in Kingston, Tasmania. We started our new life. I remember after being in that house for just a little while, knock on the door, very violent knock on the door, and my stepfather Mark is at the door. Irate, crazy, etc. to reveal what was a tattoo that said I love Rhonda, which is my mum's name. And that tattoo was tattooed over and it had a dog barking FTW, which is the world. He wanted to come into the house, he was threatening, etc. I was screaming, I was so scared. I was 10, 11. My sister was there, same, scared, very scared. He then said, let me in or else, went next door and smashed his car into several trees over and over, saying that the house was next, he was going to crash into the house, etc. The cops came and he was then banned from Tasmania and then we were left reeling from that moment. I was then enrolled in Kingston Primary School and my life started to play out from there. But during that time, I'd started to learn karate, put together this thought process that I needed to protect my family. So I picked up karate and the uniform and started to present myself as a tough guy and couldn't be further from the truth. I was a very meek and mild, shy, emotional child. Got into karate, tried to hold it together, and my mum was exhibiting alcoholism and drug abuse. It became difficult for me to live with her and I moved out. Around that time at 13, 14, I forget now, something I'll have to ask my mum about to clarify. I found out that my father had died and he died in Pentridge Prison in Melbourne. He died of drug-related issues. I was told that his internal organs had shut down and that's how he passed away in Pentridge. At 14 years old, I moved out of home. The police were getting called to my house. My mum and I were not getting along. And it was getting pretty raw. So the police recommended that I leave home. My social worker recommended I leave home. So I left home at 14 years old and started living on my own. In friends' houses, to and from couches, climbing in and out of windows, avoiding parents. Some very good friends helped me out there. You know, just a tough time, but, you know, good friends made all the difference. Started a life of drugs and alcohol as a teenager. Selling drugs, taking drugs, drinking alcohol to absolute excess, you know, and selling the drugs, and that would pay for the alcohol and the drugs, and it was a cycle that started when I was 14, 15, 16. 18, I was a complete wreck. I went to my doctor one day and I was having abscesses all over my body, in my legs, my arms and my neck and my face. He called them abscesses that he would drain, and I didn't know what was going on or why. And he simply said that I was malnutritioned and living on alcohol. We were also committing crime, stealing cars, fighting. It was tough. My doctor said to me, "You're either going to die or go to jail." That was 18. So I had to make a decision. And at 19, I was in my house with my housemates, and on came a video called Pumping Iron. Arnold Schwarzenegger. From that moment on, I endeavoured to start a bodybuilding career to help pull me out of what was a very difficult time in my life with drugs and alcohol as a teenager. And so I pursued it. I also, in 2000, 2001, picked up Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Even though my stepfather had passed away, that mindset had kicked in and stayed. Said to my coach around that time, I want to get big and I want to get good at Jiu-Jitsu. And he said to me, choose one. So I chose. At the age of 21, I chose bodybuilding. Very successful career, won Mr. Tasmania, Mr. Australia. Went to the Mr. Universe competition in Germany.
The Mr. Universe competition is all about buff bodies rippling with muscles, and perhaps it's not somewhere you'd expect to find too many Tasmanians. The Tasmanian man actually came in 5th at the World Fitness Federation's Mr. Universe competition held in Germany. Darran Petty's story is one of achievement against the odds.
This is all from 2000 to 2007. At the age of 19, obviously with the bodybuilding and jiu-jitsu, I was attempting to change my life, turn my life around, and I picked up my first job, which was childcare with Lady Gowrie in Hobart. And that was a very difficult time in my life, trying to change my life from being alcoholic to working with kids, rocking up to childcare, hungover. So that was a time of turmoil. There I was, trying to change my life after seeing Pumping Iron, wanting to hold on to that to drag me out of the tough times. But at the age of 21, I declared bankruptcy because of loans that I'd gotten out and spent on alcohol and drugs. Therefore, it was very difficult for me to actually live my life. I had no support whatsoever from my family in any way, shape or form. So there I was on my own, supported by my friends. That was very tough on my friends to have to deal with me in that way. And I really feel that now in a big way. I look back at those times and really think of who helped me and how thankful and grateful I am for them. Bankrupt 20-year-old trying to live, that led me down the path of moving steroids around to be able to afford my bodybuilding career. I was going from paycheck to paycheck, trying to live and afford gym memberships and supplements and steroids and things. So I quit bodybuilding and obviously went back to my first love of martial arts, specifically Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Started Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu right here in Hobart, and immediately I wanted to take Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu very, very seriously, specifically with competition. You know, started winning championships, won the state championships at that time, and then started really to take that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu game very, very seriously and really hold myself to a high standard. I wanted to continue to keep myself occupied from going back into the previous life, training very, very hard, day in, day out. And I guess that's where the Trojan Academy story really does begin. After about 4 or 5 years of training and competing, and that wasn't taken seriously. So I started to look outside the state for a more professional coach. And I found that in my now good friend, Daniel Cherubin. And I saw within him the professionalism that I was looking for. I know. I was still pretty heavily embedded in selling steroids. In hindsight now, one of the biggest mistakes of my life, of which I've had many, many, many mistakes, the trafficking of the steroids kept me alive. It was very difficult for me to keep a job with my history of alcohol abuse and drug abuse. It was very difficult for me to just live in general. After being bankrupt, it was extremely hard through my 20s to get a rental at all. So I was still living in friends and from friends' houses, living on fold-out couches. That bankruptcy and that way that I lived when I was younger really did set me up for not being able to do much at all. And the trafficking of the steroids caught up with me in 2011 when I was arrested and charged with trafficking a controlled substance, steroids. And for the next year and a half, 2 years, I went through the Supreme Court system waiting to be convicted and go to prison. Given the amount that I had on me at the time when I was arrested, I was headed for jail. What kept me out of jail is probably the thing that has affected me in my life the most to this date. And it is simply the fact that in 2011, my sister and I were sitting in a radiologist in an appointment that she'd made because she was feeling unwell, and the radiologist came out and delivered her some slides that indicated that she had cancer. He handed them to her and looked at us both and said, "Good luck." My sister was diagnosed with renal clear cell carcinoma, kidney cancer in 2011. I can only think that the only reason I didn't go to jail because the judge took it on board that I needed to be around my sister at the time of her death. I remember the day that I found out my sister had passed away. I was living in my academy and I received a text message from my, I guess he's my father, and he'd text me to say that she died and I'd lost my sister. The thing with me is very simple. I only look back to see how far I've come, and I never, ever, ever look back. And I was having a conversation with somebody last night about looking back at this 10-year experience of Trojan Academy. And I said, it's very difficult for me to do that because of what I've been through. But right now, as I look back and think back, talking to this microphone and to these cameras, I just hope that she's been able to watch along the way. It's not easy to speak like this, but yeah, she passed away in 2013 and I stopped selling steroids forever. I don't even know what to say about that. And now I look back, I think of how I think and how I feel about not looking back, always moving forward. That's how I've been my entire life. And I guess that's why Trojan Academy is where it is. Again, because I don't look back, later that year, I entered tournaments, one of which was the Melbourne International, where I beat Craig Jones. How I competed that year, at the end of that year, I will never know. I think I'll just answer my own question in my own head right now. I think that's what kept me alive and kept me going. Having faced the death of my sister, I needed something, and certainly that something was Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and my crew. I owe my life to the academy. So there I was, just trying to be the best competitor that I could be, the most professional Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu outfit that we could be, and I fought hard for that, very hard. And I sat in the stands that day and I cried. And I thought, how did I do it? Why did I do it? Why am I here? And then I went back after those purple belt tournaments in 2013 and began the journey to build the academy. I had to put aside the competitiveness of the reason why I started Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So every year, 2013, 14, on and on and on, we went from place to place to place. Me borrowing money off people, sleeping on couches, pretending as if I had a clue. There I was, a bankrupt person. Bankrupt lasts for very much longer than 7 years, by the way. For anyone that is thinking about going on that path. It followed me forever. I couldn't rent places. It was very difficult for me in that respect. I had to do tons of backdoor deals with venues to house Trojan Academy. And I was a very difficult person to deal with. And I can see that now. However, you have to survive, and I did survive through those times. I survived because I came from nothing. All I needed was the crew and the mats, and that is what kept me alive that entire time. Looking back now, from 2013 when my sister passed away and I was looking at going to jail, And since very recently, in the last couple of years, seeing psychologists, I realised now that I was in a pretty deep depression going through that period of my time, 2013, and the many years following that. But I got through. I built the academy. It was tough. It was very difficult. But here we are. There's plenty more stories, and there's plenty more trials and tribulations. There's plenty more ups and there's plenty more downs. But the why as to why I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, the why as to why I have run Trojan Academy and built it to where it is today, should be pretty apparent through what I've been through. For me personally, Trojan Academy is my life. It's my breath. It's my blood. It gets me up in the morning. It puts me to sleep at night. It's my brand, it's my business. So then I can go here. 12 days, everybody clap. Knock knock who?
Knock knock.
It's everything to me. Nothing worth a legacy is ever built by one person.
If there was no you guys, there would be no academy.
And that's why I sit here today, extremely grateful for every single human being that has ever been a part of Trojan Academy.
Cross, hook, cross. Here, I'm off the center line. Didn't even have to switch there.
And then you can do whatever choke here. I'm extremely grateful for the people that have doubted me. I've made a lot of mistakes along the way. I've had successes along the way. And that's all culminated to what this is and who I am right now. So I'd like to finish this video and this story right now with a very grateful message to anyone that's watching. If you're watching from within or from afar, I am extremely grateful for everything and everyone. And I'm very proud to say that Trojan Academy is celebrating 10 years. So it's the 10-year anniversary of Trojan Academy. It's the 10-year anniversary of Trojan Academy, and here we are down at Trojan Academy.